Thank you very much, Mr. Schuman, for so eloquently setting the scene for our discussion. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the government of the Netherlands for its steadfast support of initiatives that help to shift the focus from traditional humanitarian care and maintenance assistance towards more sustainable pathways, ones that bring meaningful benefits to both host communities and refugees. My name is Jumoke Jagundokumu, and I serve as IOC's Chief Investment Officer and Head of Fragility in Africa. In this role, my team and I focus on the strategic design and delivery of impactful private sector solutions that create jobs and expand economic inclusion and foster resilience in fragile, conflict-affected, and forced displacement contexts in Africa. It's my pleasure to introduce our first discussion segment featuring distinguished colleagues from the government of Uganda, the International Labour Organization ILO, and Asolavoro. Together, we'll explore how inclusive policies and enabling environments in host countries, as well as strategic partnerships, can unlock the incredible potential of refugees as significant contributors to sustainable inclusion in their communities. Given that we're in Switzerland, the land of FIFA, you see the yellow and red cards. The panelists have a set time, and what we will do is when they're 1 minute to the end of their time, they will get a yellow card. And at the end of their speaking time, they will get a red card, at which point they must stop. So my colleague on my right used to be a referee, so we'll test him out first. So to begin, I'd like to turn to Agre Kibenge, Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development from the government of Uganda. Uganda pledged to create 300,000 meaningful economic opportunities for refugees and host communities. What are the most critical measures, including policy reforms and system strengthening, to achieve this goal? And how can partnerships help to scale these efforts nationally and regionally?
Thank you, moderator. The pledge made by Uganda is under the thematic area of increasing resilience and self-reliance. Unfortunately, the ministry that I head is the one responsible for delivering on this pledge. And we have done this initially by coming up with a jobs and livelihoods integrated response plan that we have been implementing for the last 5 years. We are now reviewing that plan for another 5 years because we have not yet met all the targets we've set ourselves. But this also comes in a context where, as you've heard, the country's policies, the refugee inclusion policy, we have the comprehensive refugee response framework. We are talking of the settlement transformation agenda that facilitates integration of refugees within the local communities and expanding their opportunities. We have the overarching development plan. I've talked about that in the morning, the National Development Plan, but even the sectoral plans also facilitate inclusion and integration of the refugees. Uganda was the first country in the world to come up with a refugee response plan within the education sector. And since then, many sectoral plans have come up. On these reforms, we have also simplified registration, enforced inclusive labor laws, and expanded financial inclusion so that refugees and host communities can jointly participate fully in our economy. We have recently been implementing a World Bank project for empowerment of women, growing women enterprises, and within that intervention, there are funds earmarked to support women entrepreneurs within the refugee camps. But we have also strengthened systems by establishing job centers, satellite stations in refugee host districts, scaling vocational training. I did talk about inclusion in the technical vocational education and training, introducing digital platforms that connect people to jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities. Partnerships have been at the heart of this success, and we have aligned funding and technical support with our Jobs and Livelihoods Integrated Plan. The private sector is promoting inclusive hiring and integrating refugees, and across borders, East Africa, within the IGAD and the East African community, we are encouraging mobility and cross-border trade. A major milestone is the Refugee Uganda Self-Reliance Index, which we launched just in November this year, that enables evidence-based programming. Agriculture remains key. Uganda is an agro-based country, and we exceeded our pledge by developing 20 agro value chains, including poultry, fish, maize, cassava, oilseeds, and climate-smart ventures. But we have surpassed a number of targets we set ourselves for training, and training modules have been developed across agribusiness, vocational trades, entrepreneurship, and having been a referee, I can only commit that Uganda will do much more under the plan we have developed. I thank you.
Thank you very much, PS, and thank you for being our guinea pig in the red card, yellow card system. So thank you for those insightful points and for highlighting the critical steps Uganda is taking to expand economic opportunities. Let's build on that by turning to our next distinguished panelists, Manuela Tomei, Assistant Director General for Governance, Rights and Dialogue at the ILO. Manuela, beg your pardon. Manuela, drawing on your wealth of experience and reflecting on what we've just heard from the PS, what do you see as the most vital strategic measures and policies to strengthen labor market systems so that both refugees and hosts can access decent work on an equitable basis? And looking more broadly, how can foundational support in host countries be reinforced to boost refugee employability and self-reliance? Long question, but you can do it.
Yes, in 4 minutes, right? So thank you very much for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by sharing with you something which was said early this month in an ILO event on youth employment by a young Congolese refugee who is now living in Uganda. What he said was, "We don't lack talents. We need doors that open for us." So somehow I think the question is, what does it take to open those doors? And based on the ILO's experience, our pledge to promote advancing decent work, promoting non-discrimination in terms of access to jobs, to labor market, and to protection, I have identified at least 5 critical areas. The first area is skills development and recognition. Refugee skills and experience at work need to be valued and recognized. And this requires investing in skills profiling, prior learning systems, as well as in investing in training programs that would really provide and equip refugees with the skills for which there is a gap, for the skills which are in demand, because very often there is a mismatch between the training which is provided and the jobs that are on offer. To drive this, the ILO supports labor market information systems as well as providing support to training providers in order to make sure that the training is competency-driven and is really addressing labor market demands. The second area is fair recruitment. A key ILO priority is holding fair recruitment for all, including in displacement settings and in crisis context. The way in which people are recruited for a job may lead either to decent work and dignity and respect, or to abuse, exploitation, and the risk of forced labor. So I would just like to highlight the fact that we have been supporting Colombia and Costa Rica recently in strengthening the governance system for recruitment processes, as well as zero fees recruitment policies in order to prevent migrants and refugees, including those coming from Venezuela, to be exposed to abuse in recruitment. The third element is employment creation and enhanced employability. This is really at the very heart of the response of the ILO. We have been working, oh my God, we have been working in terms of providing business development services, identifying economic opportunities, providing advice with a view to finding jobs and skills for people. In Jordan, we have managed to reach out to 210,000 people, half of whom are members of host communities. Again, addressing both the needs of host communities and refugees is absolutely essential to prevent backlash and to ignite a dynamic of inclusive development. Fourth, inclusion in national social protection systems. Social protection is essential for support to formal employment, for reducing vulnerability. And we have been supporting in Kenya the revision of the policy together with the National Health Insurance Fund to afford a new cash benefit for female employee. Last word, partnerships. Partnerships are absolutely essential. Partnership among UN entities aligned with national priorities to support continued services. Thank you very much also for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela. Thank you for highlighting what is needed to ensure decent work is accessible on an equitable basis. From my experience at the IFC, I know that achieving such a vision is never easy, and it simply isn't possible without strong strategic partnerships across sectors and across institutions. With that in mind, I'm delighted to turn to our next distinguished panelist, Francesco Baroni, President of Asolavoro, the National Association of Work Agencies in Italy, and since 2023, country manager of GI Group Holding Italy, where he coordinates all the group's business lines nationally. Francesco, in 2022, Asolavoro launched the Welcome and Work project as a pilot to support refugees in accessing decent employment. Thanks to an innovative agreement with trade unions, this initiative has since evolved into a systematized national scale model that mobilizes bilateral funds to finance training, welfare measures, and employment pathways, just like Manuela just said. Could you share with us how that transformation unfolded? What were the key factors that made scaling possible? And importantly, what lessons could other countries draw from Italy's experience in institutionalizing refugee inclusion through partnerships and policy innovation? 4 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really an honor for me to speak here at the Global Refugee Forum Progress Review, sharing with you the results and the development of Welcome and Work project. As you were saying, Welcome and Work project was born in 2022, starting from a really strong and effective collaboration that staffing agencies perform with the Italian trade unions. I'm here on behalf of Asolavoro. Asolavoro is the Italian Association of private staffing firms. And since the beginning of the project in 2022, when the Ukrainian conflict broke out, we decided to allocate 45 million of private resources to help the thousands of people arriving in Italy by leveraging the bilateral funds and by leveraging the ability of our sector to share assets, private investments, information systems, skills, everything really helpful in welcoming refugees, but also in helping these people to find a work, to find a job, but also to maintain a high quality level of life. When we started, we immediately discovered that this help was needed not only for the Ukrainian people, but also for all the refugees. And we decided to open this measure to all the refugees in Italy. And since the beginning, thanks to the help of UNHCR, we were able to enlarge the collaboration also to other private and public entities. And this enlargement was really able to improve the impact. Just to give you an idea, from 2022 right now, we helped more than 30,000 people in acquiring a job, and we developed training courses for more than 80,000 people. In 2023, here we made the pledge to transform this emergency project in a stable one. We were able to maintain the promise, and at the beginning of this year, within the renewal of our labor agreement with trade unions, we make this project a stable one. So now we can use these funds, we can use these processes in order to help all the refugees coming in Italy. I have to thank really UNHCR, because we were really able to establish a strong trust, a strong collaboration that make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco, for showing how partnerships and policy innovation can turn an emergency response into a structural solution. Welcome and Work is a powerful example of scaling refugee inclusion through collaboration and commitment. I would now like to invite Mabe, on behalf of the Alliance for Inclusion in Mexico, to make the first featured statement of support. Mabe?
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and colleagues. It's an honor to join this spotlight session on behalf of the Alliance for Inclusion in Mexico and all of us at MAVE. This is a moment, very reminder of what becomes possible when the private sector, civil society, and international organizations choose to act together. The Alliance was created with a simple but powerful belief that inclusion is not an act of charity, but a pathway to strengthen both our societies and our economies. Over the years, we have learned that when companies coordinate their efforts, share practices, and commit to common standards, they can create employment ecosystems where refugee talent can thrive. This is what makes the Alliance so relevant today. It aims to be more than a network. It serves as a collective platform supporting companies to be ready to employ refugees, support them in adopting inclusive practices, and ensures that each new opportunity contributes to a broader sustainable model of work integration. Going hand in hand with the Mexican Refugee Commission and the national and local employment services, along with the leadership of the UNHCR, our strategic partners and members have been able to move from isolated initiatives to a wider coordinated effort. This is now recognized internationally, and it's a great success. We have seen that the private sector is not only capable of scaling solutions, aligning recruitment practices, and strengthening partnerships with local organizations and services providers. The Alliance will continue helping companies open dignified and formal employment pathways to benefit the displaced talent and the industries that welcome them. Mexico now stands as a reference point for refugee inclusion, demonstrating that coordinated multi-sector action can create models that are replicable across regions. Our experience shows that when the right partnerships are in place, we can move from aspiration to implementation at scale. But there's still a lot to do. As displacement continues to rise globally, we need stronger public policy frameworks that allow these models to expand even further. We need continued international support so more and more companies can build their capacities required for meaningful integration. And also, we would like to invite organizations all over the world, both public and private, the civil society, to join us in this effort, exchange learned experiences, tools, travel roads, and adapting this model to the continuous changing contexts. The Alliance for Inclusion in Mexico is committed to deepening partnerships, strengthening employer readiness, and contributing to a global movement where refugees can rebuild their lives with dignity through work. We stand ready to collaborate, to share what we learn, and to help accelerate solutions wherever they're needed. As we look ahead, we will continue to champion a vision in which every member of this effort, regardless of its size or sector, can become an engine of opportunity. Our experience proves that when we open doors to refugees, we do more than just offering jobs. We unlock potential, strengthen communities, and build more resilient markets. This is the future we believe in, one where inclusion is not the exception but the norm, and where we stand as confident, committed partner in shaping more dignified and equitable world of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mabe. On behalf of the Alliance for Inclusion in Mexico, for your statement of support. I would like to invite the government of France to deliver the featured statement of support on behalf of AVECEL Multi-Stakeholder Pledge.
Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour. Je suis honoré de prendre la parole en tant que représentant du ministère de l'Intérieur et du gouvernement français pour vous partager les progrès en faveur de l'emploi des réfugiés en France et en particulier pour les femmes réfugiées. Le soutien à leur insertion professionnelle est en effet une priorité de tous les partenaires de l'initiative AVECEL. À ce titre, de nombreuses associations et entreprises se sont engagées en faveur de l'emploi des femmes réfugiées pour faciliter leur recrutement, y compris dans des secteurs traditionnellement masculins comme la technologie ou le numérique, pour favoriser aussi leur accès à une pratique sportive, inclusive, gratuite et en sécurité, ou encore pour les aider à créer et développer leur propre entreprise. Nous avons également créé des ambassadrices de l'égalité, recrutées parmi des femmes issues de l'immigration, formées et qui proposent des ateliers de sensibilisation sur l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes pour tous les étrangers primo-arrivants. En 2025, 10 ambassadrices ont déjà été recrutées et plus de 40 ateliers de formation ont été organisés. Depuis 2023, La généralisation sur tout le territoire français du programme Agir, qui organise l'accompagnement global et individualisé des réfugiés pendant 2 ans, nous a permis d'accélérer cette dynamique en faveur de l'insertion des réfugiés les plus vulnérables. Au total, près de 39 000 personnes sont entrées dans ce programme Agir, dont 38% de femmes. Et nos efforts portent leurs fruits. Notre action est de tout mettre en œuvre pour que la période de rupture que constitue la migration dans leur parcours professionnel soit la plus limitée possible. Si les réfugiés sont plus touchés par le chômage que les autres migrants lors de leur installation, nous constatons une nette amélioration de leur situation dès les premières années. Et aujourd'hui à Genève, j'ai le plaisir de vous confirmer que le prix destiné à valoriser des entreprises engagées en faveur de l'inclusion des réfugiés sera mis en place dès 2026. Il sera lancé dans les tout prochains jours. Il s'agit d'un projet très attendu en France par tous les partenaires, entreprises, associations, services publics. Plusieurs réfugiés, membres de l'Académie pour la participation des réfugiés, ont contribué à l'élaboration de ce prix qui fait l'objet d'un large consensus. Il récompensera les démarches inclusives et il permettra d'inciter de nouvelles entreprises à s'engager. Je tiens à remercier solennellement Paolo Artini et toutes les équipes de la représentation française du HCR pour leur aide essentielle dans la concrétisation de ce beau projet. Au nom du gouvernement français, nous vous remercions infiniment, cher Paolo Artini, pour votre investissement et votre engagement de chaque instant en France depuis 2018. Mesdames, Messieurs, tous les engagements des acteurs de l'initiative avec elle s'inscrivent dans une même vision, celle d'une société où chacune et chacun, quelle que soit son histoire ou son parcours, peut trouver sa place et construire son avenir. Le gouvernement français poursuivra son action aux côtés de toutes celles et de tous ceux qui s'engagent en faveur d'une société humaniste, qui reconnaît la diversité et donne sa place à tous les talents. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you to the government of France on behalf of the AVECEL Multi-Stakeholder Pledge for your statement of support. Let's take a moment to thank our speakers from discussion segment 1 on my right for sharing their valuable insights. Their perspectives have set a strong foundation for the next part of our conversation. I'll now shift to my left. We can now move to discussion segment 2, featuring distinguished colleagues from the Refugee Advisory Committee to the Global Task Force on Refugee Labour Mobility, the Government of Australia, and Fragomen. This segment will highlight scalable practices and systemic approaches that are advancing refugee employment through labor mobility pathways. By drawing on refugee lived experience, government leadership, and private sector expertise, we'll explore how labor mobility can be further scaled as a powerful driver of refugee self-reliance, resilience, and durable solutions. To start us off, I'm pleased to turn to our first panelist in this segment, Ms. Bahati Maganjo, supporting the Refugee Advisory Committee to the Global Task Force on Refugee Labor Mobility. Bahati, based on your work on the task force and its Refugee Advisory Committee, how does the wealth of the lived experience and professional expertise of the Refugee Advisory Committee support efforts to scale refugee employment through labor mobility? What lessons can be learned from initiatives such as Train to Hire and multi-stakeholder collaborations? Should governments, private sector, and other actors prioritize this to deliver inclusive, measurable impact, especially for women and youth? Long question, but I know you have the answers.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For me, the starting point would be recognizing that investing in refugee self-reliance in host countries is essential for scaling employment through labor mobility and other pathways. I speak to this both from lived experience and from my current role, supporting labor mobility through the Refugee Advisory Committee, as well as labor mobility alumni. My own labor mobility journey did not start with a job offer abroad. It started with investments in host countries in Kenya, where I was a refugee. I got a Duffy Scholarship. I went to nursing school. I was able to do an internship at Kenyatta National Hospital. And investments like this allowed me to build a professional identity, first in the country of asylum, then later helped me become eligible and ultimately successful for labor mobility in Canada. Today, they also allow me to contribute back as an advisor, as a consultant, and as someone supporting refugee leadership at systems level. This is exactly where the Refugee Advisory Committee adds value. The RAC, as we call it, brings together people who have lived experience of displacement, but who also have professional expertise in policy, in workforce development, in private sector engagement, and refugee-led solutions. This combination helps ensure that labor mobility pathways are not designed as standalone interventions, but rather extensions of long-term self-reliance investments. From this perspective, one key lesson that we learned from Train to Hire programs is that trainings must be directly linked to job opportunities. It must also be accessible to women and youth. That means paid or supported training, flexible timings, recognition of formal or informal experience, and addressing barriers like care responsibility and documentation gaps. Refugee advisors help identify these fallout points and help redesign programs to reduce these drop-off points. For women and youth in particular, employment is about much more than income. It's about dignity, safety, confidence, and long-term stability. That is why investments in host countries are so crucial. They benefit refugees whether they remain, whether they repatriate or move on to third country solutions. So if we want to scale inclusive and measurable impact, we must invest early in refugees' skills and agency, design labor mobilities as complementary to self-reliance, and of course, embed refugee expertise into systems we are trying to scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bahati. Thank you, Bahati, for underscoring the power of lived experience, collaboration, and inclusive labor mobility. There's nothing like that experience to speak to the issues. Let's now turn to our next distinguished participant, Mr. Andrew Kiley, First Assistant Secretary for Migration, Citizenship and Humanitarian Policy in the Department of Home Affairs, Government of Australia. Andrew, given Australia's leadership of the Global Task Force on Refugee Labor Mobility, how do you see the potential of labor mobility to expand refugee employment opportunities further? And in your view, how does the Train for Hire program illustrate an approach that could be replicated across the region?
Thank you very much, and it's an honour to be part of this panel here today. As we all know, refugee labour mobility presents significant opportunities to invest in the skills and experience of refugees, expanding access to legal pathways that benefit and support both refugees, host countries, and destination countries in the process. Australia is committed to supporting practical solutions to achieve this goal. As chair of the Global Task Force on Refugee Labour Mobility, our objective is to do what we've been talking about today, to build the foundations to scale up and reduce barriers to refugee labour mobility programs. Australia has made significant progress in this regard, including through the implementation of our 2023 skills-based global refugee pledges. The Skilled Refugee Labour Agreement pilot in Australia is making a real impact. So far, 167 Australian businesses have sponsored 188 skilled refugees and displaced people, plus their families. They're filling critical roles in healthcare, ICT, and construction, strengthening our workforce and, just as importantly, strengthening our communities. We also recognise that there are multiple barriers facing displaced persons accessing these labour pathways. One solution, as we mentioned, is the Train to Hire concept. Australia, together with IOM and UNHCR, and I thank them for their support and engagement, and the Global Task Force more generally, is developing the Train to Hire framework in Asia Pacific. This is designed to equip refugees in host countries with market-relevant skills and match them with international employment opportunities. The goal here is threefold: remove barriers to labour pathways for displaced people, promote refugee self-reliance, and help employers meet urgent workforce needs. The Train to Hire framework, currently in its inception phase, is being developed in partnership with the Malaysian government to ensure its effective implementation and shared success across the region. We're undertaking consultation and analysis to identify key labour market needs to inform the design of this pilot program. The ultimate goal is to provide proof that this concept can be effective and can be scalable, sustainable, and replicated across our region and ideally across the globe. Linked to this are identifying key barriers to scaling refugee employment pathways. For instance, language skills can often present significant barriers to labour mobility. To address this, Australia has developed an app to improve accessibility to free English language learning for refugees and other migrants around the world. We hope that this innovation will empower refugees and displaced persons to build language skills essential for employment and integration. Another hurdle is access to documentation. Addressing this, together with New Zealand, Australia is championing the global issuance and acceptance of machine-readable refugee travel documents, working with ICAO and UNHCR to build technical capability across the Asia-Pacific. All of these efforts combined, bringing together government, business, employers, international organisations, NGOs, building and leveraging skilled refugee lived experience, will help address barriers to refugee employment and labour mobility, and over time lead to scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing those valuable insights and for illustrating Australia's leadership in advancing refugee labour mobility. Let's now turn to our next distinguished panelist, David Crawford, Managing Partner of Fragment Canada. David, through your firm's collaborative ongoing work to assist refugee talent, you've been a strong champion of connecting skilled refugees with labour mobility opportunities. Based on that experience, how can existing legal frameworks and operational partnerships be revisited to further the role of private sector actors in this space as a tool to scale labour mobility pathways for refugees?
Thank you for the question. Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the most obvious role of the private sector in refugee labour mobility is to recruit people, to provide jobs for them. But I must say, in the early stages of the labour mobility activity, we thought, are the legal pathways the priority? Should we make some changes? And thankfully, Canada and Australia, and we hope soon the UK, created special pathways. And in some countries, there are challenges. But there are countries where the legal pathways are more facilitative than we might have thought. And we don't think that they are the major barriers to making headway in the number of people who cross borders through refugee labour mobility. I'll share with you 3 areas where employers tell us they'd like to see some change, and an additional insight from my own industry. There is a challenge for governments, both in terms of their processing resources and their need to protect local labour markets, but one of the challenges in some cases can be processing delays, where in one instance a processing commitment slid from something like 6 months to 2 years. And for employers trying to recruit, that is a serious challenge. They look for alternatives. Or where filing fees might, for a family of 4, cost 20,000 American dollars just for the government filing fees. Now, I'm not saying that there is a role for all of us, but we can collaborate with governments to assist, as we can with the third factor, which is skills recognition, which is a very old problem for migration systems. And the train for hire and the hire to train even concepts that are being championed by the Global Task Force and by the Green Horizons Project look very much at the refugee experience in the preparation for a new life. The final of these four remarks is related to technology. I operate in the private sector. I work in an area where the movement and development of technology to facilitate mobility is incredibly fast. And I expect by 2027, there will be processes regarding recruitment, immigration, mobility, relocation, destination services, settlement services will be incredibly sophisticated, and the refugee labour mobility movement must be part of that conversation. But we also have an infrastructure, and many of the people involved are in this room. Settlement support, family support, microloans, all of the actors in this space can play a role in what's going on, in addition to better sharing of information of labour mobility projects taking place as we speak. If we can address these issues, we can increase rapidly. Our own firm's commitment was to help 10,000 people over the life of the GRF. We're 2,500 in with a further 1,000 in the pipeline, and that can be expanded if we can do better. But if I go back to the refugee experience, to think about what refugees face, our ambition is to get to a point where a refugee has a choice not only which job to take, but which country to go to. And I can share some facts with you before I finish. 95% of refugees going this way are retained within 12 months of starting with their employer. 95% of employers say they are very satisfied with their employees. And the ambassadors who are the refugees do a better job at advocating for the refugee labour mobility than I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for sharing those valuable insights into how the private sector can help expand labour mobility pathways for refugees. I would like to invite the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative to deliver the featured statement on behalf of the Economic Inclusion and Social Protection Multi-Stakeholder Pledge. 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. 2 years after the launch of the Multi-Stakeholder Pledge on Economic Inclusion and Social Protection, states, civil society, refugee, and community-led organizations, the private sector, multilateral institutions, and academia are demonstrating what is possible when commitments are matched with coordinated action. Today, EISP Pledge partners are driving progress across policy reform, programming, and evidence generation to strengthen self-reliance outcomes for hundreds of thousands of refugees. We are seeing real policy change underway. At least 11 states have adopted or strengthened laws and policies expanding refugees' access to work, social protection, and public services. Initiatives such as Kenya's Shirika Plan, Right-to-Work directives in Ethiopia and Thailand, and Brazil's new National Migration and Asylum Policy reflect growing political will to advance refugee inclusion within national development frameworks. At the programmatic level, nearly 500,000 refugees, other displaced people, and host community members have been reached through initiatives supporting skills development, employment, and entrepreneurship. Evidence from graduation and other holistic programming approaches shows that when income generation, protection, and inclusion are addressed together, even highly vulnerable refugee households can make sustainable progress towards self-reliance. The pledge has also strengthened the evidence base. Partners have delivered more than 20 research projects and convened dozens of learning events, including the first comprehensive evidence review on refugee self-reliance and a growing portfolio of refugee-led research. This learning is helping to clarify both what works and what is at risk if pledge commitments are not fulfilled. This is particularly important in the current context of severe funding cuts. Enhancing self-reliance must be recognized as a system-wide, ongoing commitment to advancing solutions. It is neither a time-limited goal nor an objective that can be considered achieved when financing for programs is cut or simply runs out. With the current funding and policy shifts, maximizing the impact of every investment becomes even more critical. Skills development programs and access to higher education are not only essential for self-reliance in host countries, they are also foundational for complementary pathways such as labor mobility and other solutions. As we are hearing from today's panelists, when these efforts are intentionally linked, we can accelerate progress and widen impact across both Objective 2 and Objective 3 of the Global Compact on Refugees. Advancing self-reliance is not a short-term ambition. It is a long-term imperative that anchors dignity, expands opportunity, and enables lasting solutions, and one that refugees themselves continue to champion. Looking ahead to the next Global Refugee Forum, the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative and the wider EISP Pledge leadership are committed to working with partners to convert ambition into action and pledges into measurable progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative on behalf of the Economic Inclusion and Social Protection Multi-Stakeholder Pledge for your statement of support. Thank you to all speakers for such an insightful and inspiring exchange. Today's discussion reaffirmed a powerful truth. Scaling refugee employment is not only a humanitarian imperative, it is a strategic, economic, and social investment in our shared future. We've seen that enabling policies and systems, fair recruitment, recognition of skills, documentation, access to finance, and social protection are critical to translate legal rights into real access to decent work, self-reliance, and durable solutions. We have also heard how labor mobility and in-country inclusion must be designed as complementary approaches, linking skills development and work experience in host communities to opportunities across borders, and where possible, to sustainable reintegration upon return. 3 priorities clearly stand out. First, decent work. Not just any work, must be standard. Jobs that offer dignity, safety, equal treatment, and clear pathways for skills development, career progression, and economic security. Second, inclusion and mobility work best together. Skills development locally should unlock mobility options. Mobility should reinforce responsibility sharing, addressing labor market needs, and strengthening global solidarity. Not just training for training's sake, training for jobs at hand, speaking with the private sector to understand the gaps that exist. Third, doing this at scale demands collaboration and accountability. Governments, private sector, development actors, and refugee-led organizations must work together, guided by evidence and backed by innovative financing, to turn pledges into measurable impact. Our call to action is both urgent and practical. Governments remove everyday barriers, processing delays, high fees, mobility restrictions, and accelerate skills recognition so rights in law become decent working practice. Expand safe and regular labor mobility pathways for refugees, including through Train for Hire programs and mutual recognition of qualifications, so skills can move where opportunities exist. Institutionalize meaningful refugee engagement as advisors and partners in the design of labor mobility and employment opportunities. Critically, facilitate private sector investments to create jobs and expand market opportunities in forcibly displaced affected areas, because sustainable solutions require business leadership, risk-sharing mechanisms, and enabling regulatory environments alongside policy reform. The private sector will not just go there because we want them to. Mobilizing multi-year financing to strengthen foundational support, education, training, job matches, digital inclusion, and access to finance. So refugees and host communities can grow enterprises. I'll repeat that, so that refugees and host communities can grow enterprises, fill labor demands, and thrive together. If we sustain this, grounded in evidence, accountability, and a shared commitment to decent work for all, we can scale economic opportunity, strengthen self-reliance, and deliver durable solutions. It's now my privilege to invite Zara Kassam, Head of Private Sector Partnerships at the Amahoro Coalition, to deliver closing remarks. Zara, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you to our moderator, our panelists, and to all of you who have offered statements of support. Today's discussion makes one thing unmistakably clear. Scaling refugee employment is no longer a question of whether it can be done, but of how quickly we are prepared to move from intention to execution. Across both segments, we heard a strong and encouraging convergence. Governments show what enabling policy looks like when it is applied in practice. Employers and labor market actors demonstrated that inclusion is not charity, but sound economics. And refugees themselves reminded us that dignity does not come from assistance alone, but from the ability to work, contribute, and shape one's own future. Let me share a quick story. Kapera Mungoza Jean is an Amahoro Fellow and a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, now living in Nakiaveli, Uganda. He is the founder of 2 interconnected technology initiatives, Connect Refugee, a mobile application that provides essential information to displaced people, and Compass Digital Hub, a training center that equips refugees with digital skills to build their own livelihoods. His story challenges common assumptions. We do not often associate refugees with coding, technology, or digital entrepreneurship. Yet, talent has no borders. In today's interconnected world, where technology and artificial intelligence are rapidly reshaping labor markets, we cannot afford to ignore the skills, ambition, and leadership emerging from displaced communities themselves. As crisis becomes increasingly protracted, more refugees are stepping forward, claiming their rightful place in society, and making deliberate choices about their careers and futures. This reality is reinforced by evidence. On World Refugee Day this year, we launched the Pathways to Employment report series covering 15 countries. The findings echo what many of you have emphasized today. We must move beyond pilots and fragmented initiatives towards systems that align policy with labor market demand, systems that recognize skills, enable mobility, and unlock cross-border pathways, and systems that are financed not as short-term projects, but as long-term investments in shared prosperity. At Amahoro Coalition, we believe employment is the most durable solution we can offer, not only for refugees, but for host communities and national economies as well. When refugees work, businesses grow, labor shortages are addressed, and societies become more resilient. This is responsibility sharing in its most practical and impactful form. However, progress will only be possible if partnerships deepen. If governments continue to lead with courage, if the private sector moves from the margins to the center of this agenda, if decisions are guided by data, and if people with lived experience remain co-designers of solution, not merely beneficiaries. Scaling also requires focus. We must prioritize sectors with real potential for job creation. Agriculture, for example, employs more than half of Africa's population, with employment shares ranging between 60 and 85% in several countries. This is why we have partnered with the Bank of Agriculture of Nigeria, the largest agricultural bank on the continent, to support the creation of over 200,000 jobs for refugees and internally displaced people across Nigeria. This commitment is not only about scale, it is about demonstrating what is possible when the private sector steps forward with ambition and intent, and about inspiring others to move faster and to do more. As we leave this room, the task ahead is clear but demanding. We must turn today's commitments into measurable outcomes. We must take what works and scale it across borders, sectors, and systems. And we must ensure that when we meet again, we are counting jobs created, pathways opened, and lives transformed. Finally, I would like to invite you to continue this conversation beyond today. Before we meet again at the Global Refugee Forum in 2027, we will convene the 4th Africa Forum on Displacement next year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Building on successful editions in Kigali, Accra, and Nairobi, this forum will bring together private sector leaders from across the continent to review progress on job creation pledges and to make even bolder commitments. We cannot do this alone. The expertise and experience shared in this session are exactly what will enrich that conversation, and you're warmly invited to be a part of it. Thank you for your leadership, your partnership, and your shared belief that inclusive labor markets are not only possible, but essential. The work continues together.
Thank you very much, Zara, Head of Private Sector Partnerships at the Amahoro Coalition, for those insightful closing remarks. It has been a privilege to hear such strong commitments and innovative approaches during this session. I would now like to give the floor back to our chairperson to formally close the session. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Omoke. And thank you to all the panelists, all the, I don't know how you call them, the respondents and the people that made pledges, so very much appreciated. And like I said, this is a very important session.